Why don't you ask your dice what I have behind my back? Go on. It'll be fun. What is going on, everyone, and welcome to my review of Insidious Chapter 2, leading up to the release of Insidious: The Red Door, coming out pretty soon. So last week's video, I talked about the first Insidious. It's one of my favourite horror movies of all time. Go check out that review if you want to hear me just talk about how great that movie is for 15 minutes, because I definitely enjoyed it. And the sequels to the first movie is what we're going to be discussing over the next coming weeks, starting with Insidious Chapter 2. Now, this is actually a film that I avoided for a very, very long time, alongside, obviously, 3 and 4 as well, because the ending of the first movie is so perfect. I didn't want anything to kind of hinder that or tarnish it. And I kind of knew the fact that there's a sequel, some of the kind of terror would have been undercut a bit. But that being said, there are some good things to talk about with Insidious Chapter 2, because when I watched it, I was pleasantly surprised by what I got. Starting off with the positives for this film, it's extremely well made. James Wan is just brilliant as a director. He really knows how to get under your skin just with camera work. I think the way he just frames, he often just has mounting shots or tracking shots kind of looking around the house and stuff like that. It's very smooth, very fluent. But then when something happens, he changes the camera to like more handheld, and it's a little bit more jumpy. And I think that's really, really impressive, because when something happens, the character's heartbeats goes up, the kind of camera starts getting shaky, and as though you're really nervous. In turn, you start feeling more intense just as an audience member. And I think that just James Wan, he's one of the best directors working today, and this film yet again proves that he is one of the best in the horror industry. This film also has some relatively creepy moments as well. Not even slightly as good as the first movie, but there are definitely some parts where you can feel the hairs on the back of your neck stand up a bit. A lot of creepy imagery. Again, nothing compared to the first movie, but there's some creepy stuff happening. There's also a bit of a villain reveal, which I won't say exactly, but like a backstory reveal for one of the villains. And it's pretty messed up, and it's definitely like, oh, what the fuck? Ugh. And finally, for my last positive, this is actually the positive which will make me want to come back to this film time and time and time again, is Patrick Wilson. He's incredible in this movie, and I'm going to go as far as to say that this is my favourite performance of his. In Insidious 2 specifically, I think it's his best movie. That his best acting, definitely not his best movie, we'll get to that later. But definitely, for as far as acting goes, he's just incredible, because he's still possessed by the lady in black from the end of the first movie, which that leads me down another path, which again we'll get to with the problems. But his just acting and his facial expressions and his body language, the way he just sits there, just really, really still and weird and different. You know something's off about him. And when it gets towards the end, when his secret begins to kind of unravel and the guy's there and he's kind of interrogating him, do you feel alright, Mr. Lambert? I just woke up feeling a little bit under the weather. That's all. I think the two main inspirations for this film, Patrick Bateman's performance specifically, was obviously Jack Nicholson in The Shining. He has the kind of same creepy smile which stretches across his face. And he also has the same kind of accent as Bill Paxton's character in Frailty, which I actually think he looks and sounds pretty similar to Bill Paxton, just in general. But maybe that's just a me thing. But it's almost like if Bill Paxton's character in Frailty played Jack Torrance from The Shining. It's kind of a merge of those two, and it is effective. And I'm telling you, when he loses his shit, it is a sight to behold. Now moving on to the negatives with this film. As much as I can enjoy aspects of it, and Patrick Wilson and some of the creepy moments, and the directing, it never does enough to actually warrant existing. And that's my biggest flaw with this film, is the fact that it kind of undermines the terror of the first film's ending. This film also started the beginning of just a massive downfall regarding the further. In the first film, it's such an intense and mysterious and bleak place. But in Insidious 2, 3, and 4, it's kind of just another realm that they go to. Just, you know, they just kind of like flip between worlds. They're just like, you know, yeah, I'm just going to go a little further real quick. Okay, I'm here. And it's just like a slightly kind of more dimly lit version of the normal world. I don't really like that. I much prefer when it was used sparingly in the first movie, and when it was used, they put a lot of effort into making it really creepy and atmospheric. This just kind of feels like, it just feels lazy. And it's not the worst offender of this. 3 and 4 are definitely worse in that regard. But I don't like where it led the franchise to go in regards to the further. This film also relies far more heavily on cliches than actual good scares that progress the plot forward. Like in the first movie, I don't think there's a single scare where it's a false scare. I think that everything in that movie progresses the plot forward. There's a few times in this movie where they're just kind of like, you know, the hand on the shoulder and like, ah! There's a few of those false scares which I'm just like, well, no one likes them. I'm not going to pretend as though, oh yeah, I'm not a fan of false scares. Who does? This film also really tries to keep going with the story aspect, which I appreciate, because the story in the first movie is why it's so unique and so different and so out there and so memorable. And I think that James Wan knew that that's one of the biggest contributors to that film's success, was the fact that it had an actual compelling storyline amongst all the scares. So he tried to keep doing that with this film, but by the end of it, it kind of just runs in circles. You're kind of following two different storylines throughout most of the film, and I found one of those storylines with the old guy with the dice, I found that to be quite dull. It led to, like, you know, a pretty good end reveal with what's going on and the backstory of the villain, but just actually getting there, every time that happened, it cut back to him, I kind of just turned off a little bit. Also, as much as I kind of like the ending of this movie, learning about Parker Crane's backstory and stuff like that, which is really fucked up and gnarly, I'm not a fan of where Josh Lambert ends up going and the way he goes back into the further to retrieve himself, basically. I'm not a big fan of the way it kind of just jumps back in time, and it turns out that the person knocking at the door and setting off the alarm in the first movie apparently was Josh from the future, warning his past self and family. In the first movie, when that scene happens, you just think that it's more of the ghosts, it's more of the spirits that are trying to break into their house and trying to re-experience life again. And the reason it's happening in the real world is because they've got Dalton as the vessel. That's all it really was in the first movie, but now this one tries to say it was like a warning, and the story just runs around in circles a bit. It doesn't completely fall flat on its face, but what it tries to do compared to the way the first movie story was just brilliant, it definitely flops. So overall, guys, while I do mildly enjoy this movie, I really do like aspects of it, there's just more bad or subpar things about it than there are good things. So Patrick Wilson is great, it's really well made, love the directing, and it has some good scares, but the overall storyline, the kind of way it intertwines with the first movie, and especially the way it lowers the impact of the first movie's ending, really hampered this film for me. So it's definitely enjoyable enough, I'd be more than happy to watch it. It's just not one that I'm overly fond of. I'm gonna give Insidious Chapter 2 2.5 stars. Thanks so much for watching this. Let me know what you think of Insidious 2, and look forward to my review next week on Insidious Chapter 3. Bye.